Hey, y'all, welcome back. So, we are going to continue the conversation around the full disclosures, the therapeutic full disclosures, and we're getting some questions come up, and I really value those. So, thank you so much for sharing them because there's a lot of, we're going to address today the fear because there's some really valid fears that come up that you might be like, yeah, I already thought about that, or wow, that one didn't even occur to me. So, people wanted to address a few of these. So, some of those fears being, how in the world am I supposed to remember everything? That doesn't even seem possible. The fear of not being perfect through the disclosure. If I can't remember everything, then what if I don't remember everything? What if it's imperfect? And that fear of, okay, what's the outcome? What would I expect after the full disclosure happens? And just the emotions. I don't think I can take the emotions from this and what it's like to let go of the control. So we're going to be addressing that stuff today. So looking forward to continuing the conversations, and always please continue to share what you're thinking and what this brings up for you by reaching out to us. Welcome to Beyond the Facade podcast. I'm your host, Luke Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you join me in this space today. What we're going to be doing is diving deep into the trials and triumphs and truths of seeking authenticity. Becoming your true self isn't about a single action or moment. It's a relentless pursuit, a commitment to self that reveals the rich connection and meaning that our life has to offer. So whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a regular listener, know this: what you're building here goes beyond a conversation. You're here to challenge, to change, and to celebrate the incredible journey of becoming your authentic self. Because when you dare to show up fully, the rewards are immeasurable. So welcome to Beyond the Facade. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for hanging in there with us as we continue our series around full therapeutic disclosures. Today, we are turning the mic more so over to Luke today. We have a couple, I want to say questions, but they're more fears, I guess, Luke, that really you've seen come up and see come up a lot with the clients that you're working with, the ones who have betrayed their partner. And I think I'm just going to turn it over to you, but I want to reiterate the two things that you mentioned before we hit record, just so our listeners can kind of have an idea of what we're covering today. And so the first one that often comes up is, why would my partner who I betrayed, why would they need this if they're aware of everything? That's a very common question. And then again, from the betrayed partner's perspective, that sense of overwhelm that can come trying to remember everything and wondering if, can I remember everything? I don't think I can. And just that sense of overwhelm that can come when you're getting ready to disclose or consider disclosing all of the acting out behaviors and information to your partner. I'm just going to turn over to you and let you run with this one today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This came up because we've had the first episode released, and a few men have showed up and said, I'm willing. And I can see them. I feel like I can see them, and their intent is solid. They really, really want their partner to get healing. And there's this part they are so confused about, which I want to relate to my story and Alana's story, because we have separate stories through this that were joined, is this experience that these men are talking about where they're, and Alana and I was so many countless conversations through the middle of the night, through the day, hours and hours and hours of talking. And at this point I'd been like, I I, I don't want to be in this world anymore. I don't want to be in hiding. I don't want to answer your questions, but I'm willing to. And I remember just horrible experiences that I recognize healing in them, where she would ask me questions and my stomach would turn and I would answer them. I remember laying in bed specifically one night and her asking me questions, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to answer that. I don't want to answer that. And I still have a visceral response to it. And she'd ask, and I would give it to her. And then I remember her body would respond and would tremors or shaking would happen. And I remember as I was next to her, feeling like I was killing her, like as she asked and I would give answers. And it was, I mean, I feel insensitive saying this because I can't imagine the pain, Alana, because I won't know it because I haven't been betrayed, but so painful. And I remember just like I wasn't going to hold anything back. I didn't want to give it, but didn't want to hold anything back. And we went through this experience together and separately. And I just remember what that led to after months and months of that, her asking question after question, was me one day being upstairs, walking downstairs, and I saw her at the kitchen, in the kitchen at a table, and she got 3 pieces of paper and she was taping them together long ways so she could have a really long piece of paper. And I remember her out putting it together a timeline with tick marks, and she started writing things down like met Luke, got married, moved to this certain place, had our first child, timeline. Then she started tick marking first time he cheated on me, first time I first time I caught him in porn, and the second time I found this out. And I remember being like, why in the hell is she scrapbooking this shit? Like, and
Mhm.
I'm using all the expletives to go, this doesn't make any sense. Like, stop, Alana, please, like, stop torturing yourself. And being so scared of so many things. And I want to just highlight, like, it didn't matter that I shared all of those things. Well, basically, she drug it all out of me, frankly. It didn't matter that I'd shared with her everything because the way that she got the information, and Alana, this is where I kind of like want you to speak for yourself instead of me speaking about your experience. But I'll just share this part and then please, which is it had to be delivered in a way where she could make sense of it in her mind, how it all lined up. So what she thought was reality could become a new reality. And that's not something that was really, we needed help and support on that. Alana, thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, in all the times of you telling me through the trickle disclosures, I remember the first time learning that your body shaking like you're cold, but you're not cold is a trauma response. I remember learning that and going like, oh, like my body literally cannot stop shaking because it is in trauma right now. And yeah, I never had the full disclosure where a therapist was part of us creating that timeline. And I needed to take what I knew and all these random bits of information, and I needed it cohesive so I could make sense of it. So I could make sense of my story, so I could make sense of my history. So what it felt like in my brain is I had all these pieces of information just floating around, and I needed it just clear and concise. And when you're going through trauma, so often your brain already feels like this pile of jumbled mess and pain and confusion and hurt. So I needed it just clear and concise. And that's not what I was given. And truthfully, while our therapist was really good, we would not have had the full disclosure process in the way that we now know that is helpful. So it is what it is. It was our story, it was our past, but I needed that. And so, even with you telling me everything that you had told me, and I had asked a million and one plus questions, I still needed to see it all laid out. I still needed it to make sense with my timeline and what I knew as reality.
And the part that makes me angry today, and maybe I'll work through it and give it some later, get some type of healing around it, is that through that whole entire process, you had to lead that, Alana. Like you had to lead the whole thing, right?
Well, yeah, it's the difference between active truth telling
Mm.
and passive truth telling. And so you were willing to answer my questions, sometimes hesitantly, sometimes eagerly, sometimes you just did. But it was I had the responsibility of figuring out what I needed to know. I had the responsibility of asking you. I carried the weight of what I ask it in the right way without you emotionally getting triggered and walling me off. Like all of that emotional burden was on my shoulders. And when we do the full disclosure process, the person who is trying to work their recovery is carrying the weight of their own choices. and is doing this work and offering this information as a gift towards a relationship versus asking the betrayed partner to do all of this other stuff on top of their other healing work.
Yeah. So what we want to do is what I wish I had somebody helping me do was leading the healing. And I obviously want that for my partner too, which is leading the healing so we can focus on the details and have somebody guiding us through that process because that's not really fair to anybody to try to get reality out of something that either person is trying to lead. And what I want to tell the person did the betraying is just because everything's out there doesn't mean it was given to them in a way that's going to make sense so they can move forward in their healing. Okay. It doesn't mean they're going to be able to move forward because everything's out there. It matters how it's done. So they have to be able to space where they can hear that information and you can be grounded in that. So you might not be able to move on. So,
Well, what you were saying before, towards the beginning, where the hours and the hours of communicating and talking, that really stood out to me. I see that so much, and the sheer overwhelm and exhaustion that comes. And it can be confusing because I've heard partners who are getting hours and hours of that communication where that might be new and it might seem like there's progress, but they're still not really conceptualizing what's being given. And again, like Alana, you were saying, that timeline matters. It helps with that reality collapse that you've experienced because, like we're talking about, getting information, getting it dumped on while you are in a trauma response is not going to be fully felt or even understood in the way that you need to heal. That's why a lot of my clients will say right after, well, we talked for 5 hours. I'm exhausted, and can really not relate to me what was actually talked about. But because there was talking, it's easy to be like, well, but that's different, right? So that's got to be good.
mm,
They
mm,
see that a lot.
yeah. Yeah. Just because we talked about it doesn't mean I got a chance to separate myself from that.
Mm.
I got a chance to separate myself from that.
Or
Okay. So,
even be fully accountable,
mhm,
right? Or even be fully accountable in that conversation. You might be saying some things,
mhm,
but really owning that accountability is different with what you were saying before. Like
yeah.
when a betraying partner sits there and gives that information, he's sitting in his own truth.
hmm But accountability that feels a little different than what it has in the past. Here's the other thing that came up, which I wasn't surprised about, but it's good to talk about, which is for the person that did the betraying, they go, okay, I get it. It makes sense for a full disclosure. But I really feel like in my gut, I don't know how to find all this information. Like, I don't know how to get a life full of information. And it scares me that if I'm not perfect at it, then why do it? And I don't think I can be perfect at getting all that information out there. That's
Mm.
for the person who's not hiding actively. Okay. That's literally, they're like, I'm willing to give it. I don't know how to give it. Alana, did you want to say something?
Did you know that your mom came to me a couple months into our recovery and she said, I hope you know Luke is terrified that he will forget something and he will remember later, and that will be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Mhm.
And she was so not involved. She really tried to respectfully give us space to work through it. So for her to bring that up was a really big deal that she was willing to say that. And so I remember hearing that and having equal parts, like maybe trade parts, like, I don't give a whatever. Like, I don't give a flying ass about what, if it's going to be hard for him, I want the truth. I want it now and he needs to figure it out. And there was another part of me that so badly wanted all of the truth and wanted to create an environment that it was as safe enough as it could be for you to tell the truth. And then now, with all of my training and understanding and emotionally being removed from that, I can look at that situation and go, there's so many parts activated in this. But when you have somebody who's acted out for 20 years, 30 years, and as part of their survival has shoved things down and has been in self-denial, there is a really good likelihood that we are not going to get every single piece of that. And that's actually something that when I'm working with betrayed partners is I will say, look, we do this to the best of our ability and people are still human. There could be little things that come out, but there is a big difference between smaller details and big game changing pieces that are left out. It is our responsibility and the person who is going to be accountable to share everything that they know and to share all of those big pieces. And we've had this before. 6 months later, they go into a Walmart and they see this random little toy of a bunny rabbit, and then they remember something.
What might
Right.
happen around Easter time? Like,
Thank you.
it can trigger a memory. And we actually make space for that in our disclosures. We allow the couple to decide and determine for themselves, well, the betrayed partner especially, how do you want to hear this information that might come up after? So we make space for that. It's a thing. We've seen it happen. And the way that the brain works in healing, it is very common for that to happen. It's not always a on purpose withhold of information. It can very well be as brain is coming back online, as prefrontal cortex is starting to grow, that can happen. But we make a plan for that.
Yeah.
How that's received.
And we're not talking about huge brand new disclosures.
Correct. No.
I just want to be super clear with them.
But the full disclosure creates, because I feel like I know where the person that betraying's brain goes. The full disclosure finally is a place for you, that parts of you that have been hiding in secrecy, that's no longer, if I share this, will my relationship to be able to survive, a way for you to be able to attend to that and spend time destructing that belief system that's in a more safe place. And it's hard because I'll tell you, the question for the person that comes to me and says, "Oh, Luke, I can't remember everything. There's no way I'll be able to." There's two things that come to mind. And I know it's more nuanced than this. One, which is, okay, that's a stonewalling from I can't do it because there's just too much. I can't get everything out there. So that's my reason. The other one is that person that goes, yeah, that's legit. And then I recognize there's a deeper level to that. If I go down this path of exploring everything, what the hell am I going to find? Right? Not big things, but what level of awareness am I going to come into? And life's already hard. I can't have it be another level of hard. So there's empathy there for that. And I think my biggest fear is really anybody that's done betraying, hearing this and just going back into their shell. Like just hearing it and going, it's just too heavy, it's just too much. Can't. And they shut it off. And they go back into that space, and I
And
guess
if they go back into that space, I'm curious what you most often see happen next. What's the consequence, so to speak, if that happens?
yeah, more of the same. More of the same. And that's the point. At some point, more of the same won't be okay. Right? More of the same will be too painful. And I hope that's now.
Mm.
I hope that's now. And only
Too painful as in it motivates them to finally be willing to change.
Yeah.
The pain of the acting out becomes greater than the pain of this solution. That's when we really see people step into change.
Step into change. Yeah. And it's scary. It's scary. Change, not knowing it. And I get more of the same. And
It's something I've heard you talk about, Luke, a lot when you're working with these individuals is you talk about this concept of letting go of the outcome. Because as long as they're holding on and trying to control the outcome, I'm trying to save my relationship, I'm trying to earn trust, I'm trying to fix this. And when they're really holding on to that outcome, it actually becomes a huge stumbling block for them to have this authentic healing and recovery. Can you talk about that piece?
Yeah. There's just this overwhelming pressure and weight, and my brain is wired to seek for danger and to avoid pain. So it's very distracting to not stay in those patterns. So what you do is you give that, because pain is good. Pain is important. Pain is a, if you allow pain, it creates balance, it creates healthiness if you give it enough space. So for the people that have done the betraying, they give that space and they sit with it long enough, then they start to say, which I start the conversation, I invite them to let go of the outcome. You can't take this same anymore. So I invite you to let go of the outcome and not predict what's going to happen next. And it's really cool to watch them do it.
Pain is a teacher. And I think it's a process to learn how to let go of the outcome. And there's a lot of fear that has to be made space for and work through. And that's not something that's couples work. It's not something that the person who's working their recovery comes to their betrayed partner and processes through it. It's something that really they face their fear and they have their support person, their therapist, their coach help hold that and help create that safety there that they can make that leap and take that really brave step forward and then create the safety for their partner. But I see too often that they want to go to their partner and have the partner create that safety for them. And in essence, make them feel good of, I'm not going to leave you. You can say or do whatever you want. I'm not going to leave. Okay, now I'm brave enough to step into this.
Mhm.
When instead, you're saying, come over here. I'm going to work with you. We're going to learn how to figure out that you can be okay no matter what. Even if your relationship isn't okay, you can stand in your values. You can do what's right no matter how they respond, whether they stay, they go, whether patterns change, they don't change, you are going to figure out how to make sure that you're okay so you can be a stable partner and a safe person for the person who's been hurt to come attached to. And so just really shifting them where they take that energy and then them doing their own individual work around this.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me, the world, the belief system that's set up in place that is so destructive, which is control and keeping things going the same way as the way that I'll keep my partner. And that eventually is the thing that destroys the relationship, and they don't get to keep their partner. But it's so interesting when they let go of the outcome. Now they finally get their partner when they technically make a step that should dissolve the relation or make sense to dissolve the relationship. It's such an interesting paradox.
Yeah, it's that let go to hold on. It's that leaning into the opposite of what you're really trying to get. Yeah, I see it all the time, just even wanting connection from people, but protector parts are so afraid of what's going to happen if you get that connection. So I think very similarly, I want my partner, I want to have a relationship, but if they really see me and they really know the truth, then I might not have what I really want. And that's the connection. But you have to lean in to the truth to ultimately get what you want, whether it's with your partner or someone else. That connection to yourself has to come first. And that's kind of
Abs-
what I hear you both saying. Okay.
Well, I think hearing from you, Luke, of just some of what you see, what you experienced yourself, and what you see of the individuals you work with is really helpful. The importance of having that supported help, the importance of the timeline, and really exploring the fear of not remembering everything and the letting go of the outcome and leaning into that authentic self and those value work, and then taking that leap of faith into the unknown. So, thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you to all of our listeners for hanging out with us this week. And we will keep going next week with another layer to these full disclosures. As always, we appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this is something that you connected with, I'd love to meet with you more and talk about it. So what you can do is go to chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes. And there what we can do is set up a quick conversation to meet. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Facade, where we unmask the authentic self.